degree in fine art. My family said I could go to art school as long as I could find a job. And I really liked large-scale painting. So I worked for theaters, rock work companies, movie companies, and I ended up down here in Orlando and eventually joined Imagineering. It's a very small group of my discipline worldwide. I manage the group here in Florida, and then I also review the park for Tokyo. So I find peeling paint all over the world and try to figure out what we're supposed to do about it. But Everest was really one of the best projects I ever had the opportunity to work on. It was a really large team. It was a really ambitious project at the time because it's a massive amount of area, and that's a lot of rock work. And it was quite an intimidating project at the time. So when we decided that we wanted to have a roller coaster in Animal Kingdom, we knew that we needed to integrate it into the animal story and the conservation story. And we didn't want a big giant roller coaster sticking up steel in the middle of the landscape. And so that needed to have a really large mountain to hide it. In the past on Disney mountains, we used to build a roller coaster, then build a box on top of that, and then build the rock work on top of that. But that was a really awkward way to get a rockscape. So when we built Everest, we used an integrated plan and a lot of computer technology at the time to make sure that all the steel would integrate and share some of the support. The only exception to that is that a roller coaster can never ever touch rock work because a roller coaster is full of vibration and it'll destroy the rock work. So in some places on the mountain, the distance between the ride steel and the rock work is about that big. So it was an incredible feat of technology and actually 4D planning because the pieces had to go in very specifically in order. This is the overlook. This is our first big chance to take a look at Everest. So we come down the path. We know we're in Asia. We're coming into the story. We come to this place. We're telling a history in the hardscape that there used to be a shrine here. This is an important place. It's been in use for a long time. This is our first view of the Yeti. He is actually sitting in his alcove, and if we line up this shrine against the silhouette of the mountain, if you back up a tiny bit, the peaks actually replicate the silhouette, and the Yeti is where he is in the mountain. So originally the project was called the Forbidden Mountain. It was a mountain range, and at one point the team said, well, we've got to get Everest in there. So Everest was added very late, and Everest is actually the lower peak in the back. And the reason for that is that in the Himalayas, Everest is the tallest mountain, but it doesn't appear to be the tallest because it's so tall that it's out of the misty atmosphere, it's up in another atmosphere, and it's like a magnifying glass on it. So it appears closer to you than it is. So actually the early British explorers had gone through and climbed all the surrounding mountains and then realized Everest was the one they were really after. So we kind of mimicked that in our design. My big challenge on this project is something called forced perspective. We can't really build that mountain all that big. If we got any taller, we'd have to have an airplane beacon on top. We really didn't want that because it really kind of ruins our image. So we knew we could only go 199 feet, no higher. So we had to use a lot of visual tricks of paint and color to try to make the mountain appear taller than it is. And so we had to make a lot of distance between those peaks and to try to really push that. The Everest peak itself is actually only about as tall as 3 of me, and it appears much bigger. And then the texture on that peak we did with tin foil. It's a very low relief texture, so when the sun hits it, the shadow doesn't give away how small it is. But we had to try to use all the different tricks that we possibly could, from fine art oil painting, from classical painting and illusion, to try to get that effect to work. And on this project, I spent a lot of time over in that pavilion looking back to see if it was working, with the painters by radio saying, okay, stop, keep going, more blue, more yellow, to try to get that to work out. This was also the first mountain where we wanted to try to get our rock work more realistic. For us at Disney, rock work is a huge challenge for us. We want our mountains to be better and better and better. And from the Matterhorn all the way to Everest, we're constantly evolving to get more and more realistic, whatever we can do, because we don't want to paint fake rocks. We don't want big plasticky fake rocks, and we really want you to think they're real. So in my discipline, that means every time we do a new mountain, we're looking for what's the next thing that we can do to make it real. So right now we're still working on moss. Moss is our next hurdle. On this one, we used an integral color concrete. We used different kinds of chemical stains to tint the coloring. So on days like today, the rock actually looks wet, and it's a different color this morning than you'll see it at other times. So it's a more natural kind of finish than we have like on a Big Thunder or Matterhorn, and it's a part of our evolution at Disney Mountains. Oh, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Colleen Myers. I'm an Imagineer.
I'm Denise.
Glad you could join us. So we're just taking a look from here at the long view of Everest, and I was talking a little bit about the paint and color finishes. That's my area of specialty. And this is a very casual tour in a small group, so if you guys ever have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Do you ever learn anything from a later mountain like Everest and then go back during a refurb and like redo the Matterhorn to make it look better?
Yeah, we do all the time. So we try to figure out what works, and then we kind of, if we get an opportunity, then we back it back that way. So on some of our older mountains, we have some very thick paint coatings, and so until we have to replaster, we're not really going to be able to. But we definitely do keep incorporating it, and then try to make our practices better. And here at Animal Kingdom, we have such a highly realistic theme that some things like moss and mildew and algae growth we can really do. In some of the other parks, I just finished a Fantasyland expansion project, and in that park we're a little bit more idealized. So we have to keep the story a little sweeter, a little more fantasy, but we still use a lot of the same techniques. So, I think we'll continue up the path. Is everybody spending the day at Animal Kingdom or going to other parks, or?
Back to work.
Oh, back to work. Ah.
Probably the morning, anyway.
That's nice. So when we built Everest, we had to build this pathway. This land wasn't really used, and we wanted a long hike into the Himalayas. And of course, operationally, we needed to have a restroom along the way. So this is very highly themed restroom buildings. And the story is as tourism is picked up on the Forbidden Mountain Range, this is an entrepreneur who's building a new hotel. He's going to open it soon. He's just building it very slowly. And this is a very old local hotel that's been here and kind of repurposed. Again, Animal Kingdom is always modern day, so there's an internet cafe upstairs. And if you listen closely, you can hear Joe Rohde talks up there in the internet cafe. So this building, like many of the buildings, is a whole combination of real antique pieces and brand new pieces. So one of the things that's really hard in my job is when we buy new pieces, I have to make sure that they look like the old pieces, because we're telling one story here. So the columns are actually very, very old and real artifacts, and then the doors and some of the pieces upstairs are brand new wood. So we try to work them all together. The brick is all hand carved. This building is actually perfectly square, fully engineered for hurricane and all the modern building codes, but we have to hide that. So we have to put the lean into it and try to pull the walls out as if they're battered up at the bottom, and we've got to try to sell that story even though everything's perfectly steel. There's a lot of small things that we have to use, a lot of very, very strong modern membranes. All the beams in here are actually steel. They're all themed out to look like wood, and you don't really notice them. But in construction, it was pretty alarming. Like, how are we going to make this building look 400 years old?
Do you happen to know where these beams on the bottom are from?
I don't know the exact location.
What is this building used for?
It's actually the women's restroom.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm
And
looking at
it's
it.
very hidden that way, because we don't want you to step outside the story, but it's such a long path, we needed a restroom. This was a new addition to the park. This was actually a food location. We purchased an original bus, but it quickly rusted in our Florida climate. So we had to have it remade and then used a lot of the pieces from it. And then on the paintings, we have to be very careful because we can't paint just Western paintings and say you're in Nepal. It's very different. Our Western aesthetic on scale and perspective, all of that's very different aesthetic. We're trained differently as artists, as if an artist in the Far East would be trained. So we had a lot of the pieces commissioned in Nepal and then brought here. And some of them were originally on the first truck from India. Many of the wood pieces are actually cast resin now, as they bought it. It's an ongoing challenge for us at Disney is this weather. It's just so hard on anything that wants to rot.
The climate's worse here than in India itself?
I don't know. We don't have a park in India, but here in the park, we wash down everything every night, and that's a lot more moisture. So a lot of it is our own cleaning that we need to do to keep an operating theme park. This building is a really great example of rural Himalayan architecture. Many of the buildings, when we studied them, are actually made out of a rammed earth technique, and what that is a trough of wood. The earth is put in there. Women pound it in the village with poles with a metal plate, and then as they form each one, they move up. So it has these distinctive lines through there, and then to keep it from eroding, there are these slurry coats. Those are kind of dripped on top. It's a very unusual, unique coloring with the red, the white, yellow, and the black. And it's very symbolic to protect the building, protect corners, those might be dangerous, protect around that doorway. And it was just something that we really wanted to bring into our story. You may not get that story as you come to Everest and walk by, but you know you haven't seen that building before. So it's just that overall, if you've traveled to Nepal, you might see things that you saw in Nepal and be like, wow, how'd they get that? And if you haven't, then you might say, maybe it's a chance for exploration at another time. So.
Did you travel to Nepal?
I did not on the project. The project took several research trips, and there actually is a documentary on the Travel Channel of one of the trips that they took. I was expecting my first daughter at that time.
Yeah, it's probably not a wise time to go.
And it was really kind of like tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
When is the mountain going to be up and when is the baby going to be born? So she's 9 this year.
Oh,
so
okay.
she hasn't worked up the courage to go on Everest yet. But
Yeah, I had seen the Travel Channel documentary, and then several years back, Joe Rohde was on property doing a presentation.
yeah. He is actually, Joe Rohde's the creative executive for Animal Kingdom. He was on Everest. He's actually in Mongolia right now painting. He is working on a series of paintings as a charity for snow leopards. And you you can follow him on Twitter or Facebook. I saw this morning he finished 10 paintings. So a lot of them engineers really have a deep love of travel. So whether we're working or not, we're trying to go places and study how moss grows under bridges or whatever our interest is. This is actually our marquee for Everest. It's an unusual marquee because it's not a big metal sign. The expedition today is Expedition Everest. That's us. The tea train that used to operate in this area, picking tea up on the Forbidden Mountains, that is back in service. Norbu and Bob are running this Himalayan Escape tour group. So Norbu and Bob have gotten us to sign up for an expedition on the tea train. So the villagers keep putting up these warning signs for the Yeti. It's a nod to maybe everything's not that great with the Yeti. The Yeti shut down the train before, or what's going on with that. So it's some of the foreshadowing for what's going to go on in the ride. Another thing to look at here is the prayer flags that are throughout the village. It's very, it's a very authentic detail in Nepal and in the Himalayas. We don't actually, those aren't real prayer flags. We are always very respectful to the different cultures. So we can't really just put their prayer flags up in a theme park. So we made our own symbols of prosperity. And then we had to make those prayer flags out of a material that'll hold up. And then they get added and decay, and they kind of add to the mystery down here. There's a huge landscaping story. It's really hard to build a theme park and have some really unusual trees and things. It can come out like a golf course in just a second, because every time we buy a tree, it's like a perfect specimen. So this tree over here is pretty neat. We salvaged it out of a private owner's yard, and it has a palm tree growing out of the camphor tree there. So we try to really look for unique elements in all the disciplines to try to give the place some history. Let's see. We can continue down the path. So
About how often does life have to be changed out?
we add to them every year with new ones. When they come in, they're really new, like a very sturdy chiffon. And actually, I have to put them in a cement mixer with some rocks to try to make them look a little more aged. And then the older ones stay up. We had trouble at first when we opened the attraction because a lot of people that work for Disney, they're just trying to keep everything really nice, but they didn't understand the prayer flags. So they take them all down and put up new ones. And we're like, that's not the story. The story is when you have an important place, you continue to add to that. And they have to build up and then kind of decay. So on this building, if you already booked your trip, then you can go through Fast Pass and you expedite your travel. If you haven't booked your trip, then you go through the standby queue. And then Norbu and Bob will get all your things together. Excuse me.
Here you'll also see where the tea trains were actually shipping tea in the past.
So in the courtyard, we've got a lot of Yeti statues and different shrines to the Yeti. Joe Rohde talked a lot on the project about how in Kathmandu, the legend of the Yeti was very, very alive. He was kind of, like when we talk about Bigfoot or swamp ape or those kind of creatures, then, you know, we're like, yes, those are around. In Nepal, there are people who are adamantly like, no, don't talk about that. And other people that are like, yes, he ate my yak the other night. So there's a lot of shrines, little offerings to Yeti. There's a lot of kind of cultural things where if the Yeti ate your yak or you're not having good luck, you put the red coloring on the Yeti, you make offers of fruit. We're just trying to allude to that cultural reference.
What if you knocked over your cactus?
Yeah, then I don't know. I think you have to do the yellow stripe around your window. And we actually work a lot with the local Nepalese groups that are here. And it's always an interesting exchange because they notice things about Everest that remind them of home. And it's really nice because we try very, very hard. I have to paint it anyhow. I'd rather paint it to be more authentic. So the Mandir here is this building in the center of town, and we actually had it commissioned to be carved in Kathmandu. We hired an architecture firm. They designed it and carved all the pieces for us. We didn't have the heart to tell them that we were going to age it down by 100 years. So when we got the pieces, they were so beautifully intact, beautifully carved hardwood. We had to take hatchets and sandblasters and all kinds of things to age it down because it didn't suit our story to have this town wouldn't be able to afford such a new Mandir when the tea train hadn't been in operation, you know, and it was built in their heyday, so we had to show its age. But we weathered all the wood, and it has different depictions of the Yeti on it. And many of them are the Yeti as protector of the mountain. And he's protecting the wildlife, and he's protecting the animals of the mountain. So there's snow leopards and yaks all throughout there. Here's a bronze statue. We age this out intentionally. It's really great because the guests keep aging it for us. But we knew it would be a high wear area, and it suited the story. When we built the attraction, we didn't really think, we never considered this courtyard, but when the guests get on three sides and are waiting in line, they seem to be playing a coin game. We couldn't really predict that, and that's one thing at Disney that's always interesting is we can't exactly predict what our guests are going to do with what we've done. And it's really cool because sometimes they find a purpose for something that we just didn't think about when we were looking at it in drawings. So they have the coin game going. The money is all collected and cleaned and given to the Animal Conservation Fund.
I see some money there from, it looks like from Nepal. Was that added later after
We added it later because we kind of had to go with the story the guests had going. So we had to add that in the prop story. But quite honestly, the whole story in this courtyard was to put this sacred rock in there, and that the whole town was built around that particular rock, and that's the most important rock. But it's really funny because the coin game, it just took over immediately. And sometimes the coins are so thick down there, it's like they shovel it. It's amazing. And quarters must work better in the prayer cups. So there's a lot of quarters, but it's great. We always try to design things that then the guests can interact with. So it's really great. So this is a small gear shop. The prop story is really great in here. There's all different props. He's selling things. In Nepal, space is very limited in houses, so the shopkeeper sleeps right there. His kitchen is that stove, and he has the picture of the king and queen. He has little tiny Yetis in here. We've hidden all kinds of things to entertain the guests as they come through. Little nods to the Yeti. Expedition patches, some of the things that if you were trucking that you would come across. And then we're going to enter the Yeti Museum. So this is the caretaker of the museum. He was actually one of the art directors on the project, and he actually is assigned in the Tokyo project now. But he, for this purpose, was Professor Pemi Dorsha, and he's created the Yeti Museum. The Yeti Museum is actually an old tea drying room, so it's a repurposed building. It has the big electric lights in it that would have been I mean, they weren't electric. They're kerosene lights that would have been used to dry the tea leaves. The tables over here were the drying tables where the tea was chopped up. The logo's still on the wall for the Royal Anandapur Tea Company. But, as we've seen a lot in Nepal, they wanted to use the room, so they threw some more wiring up there. Some of it didn't work, but they just left that, so they put some more wires, and then they ran them up to the lake. In the cases, there's all kinds of artifacts from Nepal, and then also evidence of the Yeti existing. So it's a really fun room because it's all set up to tell you, no, really, the Yeti really exists, and you should be scared to go on the trail. This one shows some of the different sightings over history. Some of the artifacts are real, some of them we, of course, would fake. In Nepal, there really isn't a Yeti totem pole, but we kind of felt like we needed some totem poles to warn people, so we made some. And then there's a lot of literature on the Yeti, different articles on it. And on the project, Joe and the team, they actually were able to meet with Sir Edmund Hillary before he died, and his son, and Tenzing Norgay's son, the Nepalese climber. And this was actually a commemorative piece that Sir Edmund Hillary gave him to put in the museum. So it was really a great project that we were able to meet so many other groups, to bring some life to their story. We're really, as Imagineers, not out to tell other people's stories, but we want them to tell their own story, and then we kind of can illustrate it. So we try to enlist help where we can, and that was a great thing. And I don't know if you've seen, there's a Discovery Channel on the making of Everest, and a lot of those stories are in this. So this is the Lox expedition. Somebody went climbing up there, and this is all they found of them. Nobody knows what happened, but it looked like somebody just ripped up their camp. There's a couple pictures on their film camera, so I don't know if we should go on this trip. This was a great example where we got the opportunity to make a line that was at least interesting. Because we all hate lines, and we don't want to have lines, but we have to have lines, so we try to really make it entertaining. This case is, this documents a trip that Joe Rohde, Ann Savage, and a group of scientists took to Nepal, and it was a rapid assessment program. So they went to Nepal, tried to identify as many species as they could quickly. They were looking for snow leopards, and then they came back with their findings, and these were the prints and pieces they found from that. And then this case, so when we got into looking at making an animatronic figure for the Yeti, we have to always look at what could the Yeti be. Was he a primate? Is he a bear? If a Yeti really exists, what species of animal would he fit into? And then how would that dictate his movement? Because there's certain limitations. If you're an ape, you're hunched over. The bear can stand up better. There's all different things. This footprint is actually a footprint that was sent to Joe Rohde. This is the most recent footprint that's been found in evidence of the Yeti. This one is real, that someone sent us, so we put it in the case. This footprint is what Professor Peme Dorje found in his travels, but I don't know. It's kind of big. We don't think the Yeti could really be that big and do what he does, so we're not sure about that. So Norbu and Bob, they really didn't like the museum. They don't want you to believe any of this. Just go on your trip. Don't cancel and ask for your money back. They don't, it's fine. Everything's fine. So.
Himalayan Escapes welcomes members of the Expedition Everest team. When you board, please sit down immediately, pull down the restraint, and secure all gear in the cargo bag in front of you. Thank you.
this is our load unload area for the train. Step up here a little bit further.
Well, you definitely did take a few minutes to get there.
So when we're trying to tell a really immersive story like this, we're always kind of caught because we really have to use a roller coaster vehicle and we can't really just use a train. But we tried as best we could in the region to figure out it's a rear-driven train that would be used for mining equipment. It's rear-driven because of the steepness of the mountains. So we put the cab on the back. There's a steam effect, so when it comes in the station, it looks like it's blowing smoke. It doesn't blow smoke. It's a modern roller coaster vehicle. We're trying as best we can to take your mind off that. And it's a great moment when it blasts its steam. One thing that really made that I had to be aware of is that if you have smoke like that, you have to have smoke all the way along the train. So everywhere the train goes, I had to make sure the smoke was on the ceiling so that you would get that feeling. You know, if we can build it subtly, you'll start believing it's a steam train. It's probably our most heavily aged vehicle we have on Disney property. We tried to rust it out, make it look at least like a roller coaster as we could. And it's a great ride because it's a lap belt and everybody can ride. That was a huge thing for us on the project. We wanted the whole family to be able to ride if they want to. So I don't know how many of you have been to Everest. Yeah, it's a fun ride. Yeah. So let's see. We can head over to there. This is our merchandise shop, so we've tried to integrate it into the story. We've tried to continue some of the Yeti story. A lot of the casework we actually had made in Kathmandu and then modified to use in the park so that we don't kind of step out of the story as we go in. We have a giant Yeti puppet. Great prop story in here with all of the gear and all of the equipment and this giant Yeti puppet that we had made. All the hand-carved wood figures. It's such a beautiful tradition of hand-carved wood in Nepal. So we wanted to keep integrating it into the story. Here on the overlook, we can get a better idea, look at the track and all the pieces for the track. It's really hard to integrate a roller coaster because it has, you know, tube steel and it's round and it really doesn't look like a train track. So we added all the wood trestle and all the pieces to try to make it look like a train track. There's actually a staircase on that chasm bridge so that if we need to unload the train at any time that people will be able to walk down there. I can't get a lot of people to walk over that bridge, but I like to go over it. It does have a pop-up handrail, but still, people don't. They get like a couple steps out. One thing as an Imagineer I never really thought about, but I'm not afraid of heights, and I couldn't be afraid of heights with my job. So I've been all over the mountain. I've been in a crane basket swinging from a cable to paint. Because when we get into these really big pieces, it's a lot of logistics. How do we get there? How do we work on that? And it's great teamwork in Imagineering because we have so many different expertise, and Imagineering is really great about bringing in specialists. And it's a great partnership because we have to have some really great engineers that we're arguing with because we're like, we've got to have it look like it's falling down, you know. So it's always funny to see what is the hardest thing to get. One of the things here that was very important is the stacked firewood on the roof. In Nepal, wood is very scarce, trees are very scarce. That's a sign of wealth, and it's very important because the merchandise shop is the wealthiest merchant. He has a lot of wood up there. The wood's not used for fuels, it's only used for funerals. So you can imagine the conversation with the fire department and the building inspector when we wanted to stack firewood on the roof. So there's a lot of those different pieces. Character plaster-wise, we're always trying to, hide retaining walls, hide different berms. We have to theme all of that into the story. Overall, safety, maintainability, operation of everything is so important, and so it's always at the topmost of our list.